Hey, what's up, everybody? Seth here. Had some Checkride delays. Hanging out in the office, figured I would open up a live stream and see if y'all had any questions. So I'm going to see if I can pull this up on my computer here. Ask away. There's a whole one person here. Just going to pull this up. Not really a live streamer, so you'll have to forgive me if I'm doing this all wrong. But I think I can pull up questions here. Morning, Zach. Let me see. It's live. Okay, cool. Got that pulled up on the computer. Hi, Mr. S. Good morning. Just general check ride questions, whatever you got, really. I've got 30 or 45 minutes at least. I was planning on doing a private and commercial check ride today, and the pilots were going to fly up from another field, and the ceilings are too low for them to leave. So I'm just sitting here in the office getting ready for. I actually have an Air Force mission starting tomorrow that I'm getting ready for, and have a little bit of downtime. Probably going to be down until noon. All right, Zach just downloaded the demo. Sweet. Yeah, I'm really happy with that new the ACE Guide demo, or the new ACE Guide version 6. I actually have 6.1 that I'm going to release today because some of the links are broken. But Zach, what you'll notice is the demo doesn't have the new link structure that the actual one does. So use the code TRAVELAIR when you're buying, and you'll get the discount there. But there's actually a cool way that you can study based on topics. So instead of just looking up at the Checkride ACS, you can look up topics. Hey, good morning, Tommy. And you bet. You're welcome. I'm glad people find the content helpful. So anybody working on any ratings or anything? Like I said, I was doing a private and commercial today. The private will probably cancel because of weather, and then we'll see. I'll give it the commercial another couple of hours before we have to call that a no-go. So head tester working on IFR, CFII for John. Very cool. CFI. Those are CFIs. that's a big lift. Getting ready for commercial check ride. Cool. Any advice for CFI II? Quit my career in December. Just got ratings last month. Hey, that's good. That's a lot of people doing the career change thing. I really respect that. It's a really fun industry to get into, and a lot of people get some satisfaction from that. As far as suggestions on the CFI, CFII, you really need to practice teaching. I've said that before. Practice teaching to folks. Get comfortable, doing the presentation thing, because it's all about knowing the information as the baseline, but knowing it well enough that you can explain it to somebody else. That's the key to being a CFI. Yeah, you're welcome for the ACE Guide there. Working on commercial, getting ready for private. Overlooked training points in IFR. Yeah, I just did IFR or instrument ride yesterday. A couple of things on the instrument. So first of all, know that you don't have the limitation of not flying in icing conditions as an instrument rated pilot. You can't fly in icing conditions because of the plane, so not your rating. So you can fly in icing as an instrument rated pilot. And what I've noticed is a lot of the private pilots, since they're training in aircraft that are not certified for icing, they don't learn about how to fly in icing. And so my concern is you get your instrument rating in a plane that isn't certified for icing, so you haven't learned anything about it. And then the first time you fly an aircraft that's certified for icing conditions, you don't have to get some special endorsement or anything. You just go fly in icing conditions now. So make sure you're not skipping that entirely in your instrument training. There's a really good advisory circular. It's part of the ACE guide, actually. But that advisory circular is the 9174B, and it's a pilot's guide to flight and icing conditions. So that's a good advisory circular to cover with your CFII to actually learn, okay, if I am flying an aircraft that's equipped for flight into known icing, how do I do that safely? So don't, skip over that entirely. Another things is stars and departure procedures. Those tend to be pretty weak points because, again, we're flying an aircraft that aren't equipped to really fly stars or departure procedures. So you tend to not cover that as much. So those are a couple things. Do I travel for check rides? Sometimes, I've got a couple schools that I travel to a lot, but outside of those schools, I don't travel as much anymore because I've got kind of three jobs. I do my Air Force job, my job with Southwest, and then the check ride job. So that's a lot of time away from the house if I travel all the time. Cool. Common struggles during commercial orals. Um, yeah, so understanding the operational control and the limits of holding out. One of the things that you'll probably hear is like, okay, you can't ever hold out as a pilot. That's not entirely true. You can hold out your services as a pilot all you want. There's no FAA regulation on that. But holding out as an operator, you need a certificate to do that. So being able to define who has operational control, that's a really important thing that I think some students overlook. They're caught up about the holding out piece, and they don't really understand how to define operational control. So if you've listened to any of my stuff, you know that for commercial stuff, I'm really big on, hey, let's understand operational control really well, because that's how not understanding operational control can get us into a lot of trouble as a pilot there. Giving flight reviews. Oh, there's a new AC out. That one is also in the updated ACE guide. But the new advisory circular there is the 6198 Echo is the new guidance for a flight review. So I'd highly recommend looking at that. And then I would highly recommend using the FAA safety program, the WINGS program, so faasafety.gov. If you go to the website, echozuluwings.net, so ezwings.net, it actually can drill you down to the actual IPC and flight review section for credit for wings. So the reason I recommend that is you're going to make your student that's getting the flight review, or your pilot, they're going to have to go on the wing site, take a couple of courses, and then you're going to do the flights. You have to sign their logbook, but once they're done with wings, the FAA actually prints off a certificate for their flight review. So it's not just you signing them off for the flight review, but it's the actual FAA system that's signing them off for a flight review. So that's really good. And also the wings should be done every 12 calendar months versus 24. It's good for 24 calendar months, but the FAA wants you to do it every 12 months. So it's better for you from a monetary standpoint as a CFI of telling your students, hey, you need to participate this to keep your phase of current, or keep your phase of wings current. You need to participate in this program every 12 months. So you don't just need to come fly with me every 2 years. Let's set up a lesson, one lesson a quarter would be great. And if you did one lesson a quarter with that student, then they would always be current in a phase of wings, which shows the nature of compliance. It can help you I call it a get out of jail free card with the FAA. It's really good. So highly recommend using the WINGS program for the flight review. All right, now we're getting some questions. I like it. So that's flight reviews, getting prepped for private pilot check ride. Hey, the ACE guide. Yeah, the ACE guide, the reason I started to sell that is because I created it for myself, because obviously I give probably around 200 check rides a year. And in the process of doing that check ride, I just need all these manuals, and I just decided to link them all together because I was tired of opening, 6 different documents during a check ride or even more. So having all those in one place, and then especially the legal interpretations kind of at my fingertips, I think it's really useful. I use it every day. CFI initial fee. So it varies. I think, so I'm charging $1,200 right now, which is seems to be kind of common if you come to me. And then if I travel to you, it's around $1,500 because that is a little bit longer. My price might actually come down a little bit as I perfect the new ACS standards and um, a plan of action scenario based with that, because I think the check ride could become significantly shorter. So I don't plan to increase my prices at all over where they're at right now, but it does take a little bit more time, and it can easily extend into 6 or 7 hours if you have an applicant that's maybe a little bit slower at explaining stuff, and it just takes you longer to get through all that material. So yeah, I've noticed new pilots don't understand trim for airspeed, power for altitude. Yeah, that's from Mr. 7629. Yeah, the uh, pitch controls. I call it the power attitude configuration. So you should have. I'm sorry. Yeah, you should have a power attitude configuration for a given airspeed, and you're going to trim that off, trim the pressures off at those given pack settings. I've done a couple videos on that. It's really common for a private pilot applicant, especially they're trying to fly an airspeed rather than fly an attitude. And so they wind up chasing an airspeed, and they get into a little bit of a pilot induced oscillation where we're constantly chasing an altitude now because we're fixated on the airspeed versus just trying to fly a known pitch and power setting and trim off the pressures. So yeah, I do think that's a weak point. I'd see it less in the instrument commercial. So I think that's just really common when you're learning as a private pilot. Uh, that's one of the polishing things that happens during your instrument. Yeah, so John, talking about the flight review, I guess you had a tricky situation with somebody that hasn't flown in a while. So the Rusty Pilot course by AOPA would be great for that. And then also, if it's because of medical, I would recommend that they take the Basic Med course, which even if they're not using Basic Med, there's a lot of good stuff in there in the Basic Med course. Because at the end of the day, we're all kind of self-certifying that we're healthy because our AMEs aren't up to date on our day-to-day health, right? Only we are. So we are all kind of self-certify our medical to some extent. So that's a good course for that. Finance for Part 61, doing a career change, final push. Yeah, this is for Johnny 160. If you're financing your parts, financing any training, I mean, that's a huge decision. I can't say that I 100% recommend that. If you can finance maybe a portion of it, that might be better than financing the whole thing. The problem is we're going into this, the industry tends to lag. So you're seeing a slowing of hiring at the airlines, and that hasn't yet trickled down to the flight training because y'all have kind of a buffer between, you're 4 or 5 years away from the airlines. What I'm concerned about is we've produced maybe enough pilots already, or maybe even too many. We won't know that for another few years. So I could see a scenario where a lot of people that have financed their training right now, by the time they're ready to they've got the hours to get a job, there's not a job available. So that would be the danger, is you've got this really big loan payment that's due every month, and you don't have the income to offset that. That would be something that would concern me. Totally personal decision there on if you want to finance it. It is a good industry to get into, but I think you need to have a certain amount of passion for it. And then you need to be very careful financially because it is a little bit of a boom bust kind of industry. So you could spend a lot of money easily on training and then not have the job to offset that loan. Let's see. Soon be flying a buddy, private pilot, safety pilot each flight. Cool. Well, head tester, glad you like the ACE guide. And then, yeah, the safety pilot deal. There's several, if you use the ACE guide, there's several advisory or the LOIs in there about safety pilot time. Big picture, as a safety pilot, you generally, if you want to be properly rated, of course, in the airplane. And let's say you're in a 172 with your buddy puts the foggles on, they're sole manipulator, so they're logging simulated instrument time and they're logging PIC as sole manipulator. Now you've agreed to act as PIC, so you're logging PIC. Now let's say you're flying from point A to point B and it's further than 50 nautical miles. So that's a cross country, but you can only log cross country if you did the takeoff and landing 50 nautical miles away. So you can't dual log cross country. So at the end of that flight, let's say it's 51 nautical miles and it takes you a 0.5. The pilot flying can log about a 0.4 of simulated instrument because they can't have the foggles on realistically the entire time, right? So they log a 0.4 of simulated instrument, a 0.5 of PIC, a 0.5 of cross-country PIC. You, as the safety pilot, will simply log a 0.5 of PIC time and no landings. So that's all you get to log. Then you can trade out foggles. Your buddy is going to act as PIC. You're now sole manipulators logging simulated instrument and cross-country, and you can leapfrog that way. So you're both building a little bit of cross-country time during that mission, and you're both building the equal amounts of PIC time. But don't dual log the cross-country time unless you're actually doing the landings. So that's something to look out for. Yinny Manny wants to know the best way to build PIC time for the MEI. Man, that's tough. Generally, if you can find a school, sometimes a school needs an MEI enough where they'll help offset the cost of the MEI. Another good way is once you have your rating, if you can find a pro pilot that's maybe doing pilot services in a Baron or a King Air, something that doesn't require a type rating. You want it to be piston or turboprop outside of like a 350, a King Air 350. So a smaller turboprop. Ideally, it'd be like a smaller light twin, like a Baron, for instance, would be perfect. If you can get in with a Baron, then you can log that as PIC time on a Part 91 kind of pilot services. There's some small flight departments. For instance, there's been a couple businesses that I've flown for in the past that have a B-58 Baron, and I'll bring people along with me that they can log PIC time. So that's something that you could do that you just don't have to outright pay for it, right? All right. Safe is, that's amazing. Advanced ground instructor. Cool. You're preparing for your CFI initial ride. That's huge. AGI is exempt from the FOI. Yeah, because the AGI is assuming that you already have a ground instructor, so you don't have to take the FOI. And then when you get to your CFI ride, your examiner may not ask as many FOI questions because you've already demonstrated that knowledge. I would still bring the FOI test results just in case, but when you're making the application, there's a checkbox to say, hey, I already hold a ground instructor rating, and so your IACRA shouldn't force you to upload those results. Your DPE may still ask to see them, but they shouldn't be required there. Zach, is it advisable to immediately pursue high performance complex after private? Or further time in the Skyhawk advisable? Zach, that's kind of up to you. I mean, if you have access to a high performance complex plane, then yeah, go for it. The only thing I would recommend is if you're flying that high performance complex, often they're the same airplane, make sure you're doing it with proper endorsements and that you put in the notation there that this is to Part 61-129 standards. And that will count towards the 61-129 training for commercial, which requires 10 hours of complex training in an aircraft. So if you are going to get that training right after your private, make sure you get it to commercial standards so you can then use it towards your commercial certificate when the time comes. Yeah, if you're doing pleasure flying only and not seeking your commercial, it's totally up to you. There's some flight clubs that have higher performance planes available. So in that case, yeah, get your high performance done so you can start taking advantage of those airplanes. Uh, so training to emphasize, this is another high performance question by Yanni Manny. High performance in a 182. What I'm talking about is maybe the 182 honestly isn't that big of a step up from like a 172. So really what we're going to focus on is failure modes of that propeller governor and how to manage the propeller. So working that propeller management into your workflow because you're not used to having setting an RPM and a manifold pressure. So talking about any flight manual limitations, because some 182s will have an RPM limitation. So they'll have continued operation, for instance, at 2330 to 2440 is restricted. So pointing those restrictions out as appropriate and making sure that transiting those RPM ranges is okay. It's just continued operations there. So if you're flying a 172 and you're not used to having the blue lever, that's something that you could easily overlook. And then generally speaking, the fuel management, the fuel burns higher. So, hey, we accounting for that appropriately. Maybe a little bit of a descent management because we're going to be using the 182 for more cross countries. It's a little bit faster. So are you planning for those descents appropriately? Those are just a few things that I would cover there. But yeah, mainly failure modes in regards to the engine and governor. So doing a couple practice engine failures, for instance, if I had an engine failure in a 182 and my propeller was still spinning, so in other words, it wasn't a catastrophic failure, I'm going to reach down and pull that blue lever all the way back to take it to the coarsest pitch as possible, which means it's the lowest drag configuration for that airplane. It's going to give me a lot more glide distance. Recent instrument ACS changes regarding using autopilots for checkride approaches. So there wasn't really big changes in that on the instrument ACS. It just reiterated the fact that if the aircraft is in, if the aircraft has an operable autopilot that's capable of flying an approach, me as the examiner, I need to have you fly an approach using the autopilot, and then you have to fly an approach without the autopilot. So that's the main thing. Really, that's been in all my plans of actions before this ACS. Every examiner will ask you, hey, is this, or they should be asking if the autopilot's capable of flying an approach, and if it is, I need to see you use that. If there's some autopilots that are essentially wing levelers, they're not capable of flying an approach, so I'm not going to ask you to fly an approach with an old autopilot that's not capable of doing that. But like a GFC 500, GFC 600, fully capable, very capable autopilot. So yeah, I'm going to want to see you use that during an approach, and then I'm going to make you fly an approach without using it. So that's there. It was a small written change in the ACS, but really the examiners shouldn't have changed how they're examining the use of autopilots during the instrument check ride. Head tester. Yeah, head tester, if you want to send an email to sethlake@vsl.aero, I can, or you can DM me on, I don't know if you can direct message me on YouTube or Instagram, wherever you want to get a hold of me. Just say, I need your email address or name that you use to purchase the guide so I can look up your customer account. I'm going to send you a new download link. Everybody that's watching, the ACE guide came out a couple days ago, version 6.0, kind of a bigger update. 6.1 will probably be coming out today or tomorrow because there were some broken links that I've already found. So just a minor, fixing some bugs there. Each time I update that, if you're registered, you should get a new download link. If you don't, and you hear about it through like some of my media or whatever, I try to make some social media posts about it. If you hear that there's a new version released and you never got an email, just send me an email and I'll shoot you a new download link. A Texan, hey, you're welcome. I'm really glad it helped you with your private pilots. That's good to hear. All right. James Dew. I'm not night current and instrument rated. 3 approaches under the hood with a non-CFI safety pilot, and also get my 3 takeoffs and landings full stop steering and height. Is this legal? Man, is this some sort of check ride scenario question? Hmm. Let's see. So you have to be night current to land with a passenger at night. A safety pilot is not a passenger. Safety pilot is a required crew member. So I think we have 2 different questions. Is um, is this legal, or is this a good idea? Is this good risk management? What I would recommend if you're not night current is to get night current with a CFI that is current, right? And that's a new legal interpretation that got rescinded. I think it was the COMEX interpretation. Used to, it said, hey, the student, the CFI didn't have to be current because it wasn't a passenger. So I think inferring from that, the answer to your question is that's probably not legal. Make sure you go out, get current with a CFI, or I guess you could do that solo. But then again, doing that solo, is that good risk mitigation? It kind of depends on your comfort level. Um, I've got several thousand hours of single engine land time. I've done that before where I'm not current by a few weeks. I'll go out solo, do some night landings, get comfortable again. For me, that's fine. Um, so it's just not, the risk benefit isn't there. So I wouldn't risk that. If you don't feel comfortable, go up with a CFI. But I think doing approaches at night is really good with a safety pilot. That's valuable nighttime in simulated instrument time. So that part, hey, that's a good idea. Frank, safety pilot topic again. 2 pilots time building to ATP cross country to a point greater than 50 and not landing at that point per 61 1B 6. How would we log this to be legal? 61 1, that's the definitions section. So I'm guessing that's reference to I don't have that memorized. That must be ATP cross country time. So what Frank's saying here is for ATP cross country, you don't actually have to land. You just have to fly to a point greater than 50 nautical miles away. You could probably just make a note that says, hey, this is ATP XC. If you wanted to put the actual point or a waypoint that's near that somewhere in the memo line, just in case, if somebody is being very closely monitoring your logbook, at a point that exists that you flew to that's actually longer than that they could check the Great Circle route distance and verify that that was greater than 50, that would be good. A lot of this, honestly, is just, it's the honor system, guys. It's impossible for me to validate everything you put in a logbook. I just, to some extent, to a large extent, it's just a lot of trust of, hey, you're telling me that you did this, and I believe you, unless there's a valid reason for me to not believe you. Kind of the burden of proof is on me to say, no, that's not legal because of X, Y, Z. That I run into that where the a commercial applicant that comes that did the long cross country, and they put in the memo line that they had a passenger on board. Well, that's now for me proving that that's not valid is very easy because they put in there, hey, I had a passenger, so that's not solo, and that's not. We have 2 options with that. It has to either be solo or performing duties with an authorized instructor on board. You can't fly it with passengers on board. That's not an option. So you put that in the memo line. Now that thing is invalid. If you just put, hey, I was solo and you actually weren't, there's no way for me to prove that. So it's really kind of the honor system there. So if you're going to put ATP cross country time, then I'm going to trust that it meets the ATP cross country. If I'm really auditing your logbook and kind of asking that, maybe having that waypoint in there to prove, yeah, it was from this point to this point that's 55 miles away. So that's why it counts. Hopefully that makes sense. Bert, have my instrument Checkride afternoon ace guide has been instrumental. Nice. I see what you did there, Bert. Sean, I have a PA 28140 FAA approved flight manual that is 7 pages long without performance information. Can I reference Sporty's owner's handbook for a check ride for performance calculations? Yeah, that would be a good decision sequence to explain to your examiner and explain to your examiner that, hey, here's my PA 28140 approved flight manual from a long time ago and it doesn't have any performance information. Maybe find a newer flight manual and say, the newer flight manual does have performance information for a similarly powered aircraft. And then the Sporty's handbook also has that. So I realize it's not FAA approved, but this is a way that I'm managing the risk of not having performance data is using the best that I can find out there. And one of these is the Sporty's um, owner's handbook for the plane that you're flying. So that's good risk management. So I would like to see that as an explanation as a DPE. I wouldn't just start using it without any explanation because then I'm like, well, is that FAA approved? So just acknowledging, hey, I know this isn't FAA approved. Here is my FAA approved one. There's no data in it that's useful. So here's the one here's how I'm managing that risk. That'd be a good idea. All right. Saif, I'm terrible with names, sorry. Sir, I tried adding my AGI to my IACRA just now, but it would only allow me to add pilot certificates. What airport do you fly out of, and what's the best way to schedule with you? So maybe two questions there. If you're doing the AGI, let me just pull up IACRA here real quick. It's been so long since I've done one of these applications. I think what you might be doing is when you so I'm going to go to applicant, start new application. You want to go instructor. Yeah. If you go to instructor and ground instructor, make sure you're doing that. Instructor, ground instructor, standard, part 61. And then if you already have a basic, you would want to do an added category in class. And then that'll bring up a menu. And I'll just show you here. Let's see. This is very technical. So I've got ground instructor, standard, 61, added category and class, and then here's all your options for basic advanced stuff. Hopefully y'all saw that. I don't know. But that's how you would make that little application there. And then I fly out of the Hotel 35 airport or the Romeo Uniform Echo airport, the two that I fly out of. You're welcome, Frank. You're welcome, Sean. Okay, Saif still has a question here. So if do you have a ground instructor certificate? I guess that's the question. If you don't have a ground instructor certificate, you're not adding on anything. You're just creating a new ground instructor certificate. If you already have a basic ground instructor and you're adding AGI to that, then that would be an add-on to your ground instructor. Let's see, JMO Stew. Not a commercial pilot, but make videos of my flights. Can I post them on YouTube and monetize them legally? I'll have to check if there's a legal interpretation for that. I don't really know, I don't. That would be a great question for the FSDO, but I just don't know. I'm more of, a lot of people that are on here have probably watched a lot of my content. I don't do a ton of flying videos. I do a few, but they're always very targeted at training. I do monetize those videos. I am a commercial pilot as well, so maybe that makes a difference. I don't know. I would want to ask the FSDO saying, hey, and do that via email, by the way, too. Hey, before I post these, if the channel's big enough to monetize, would I be breaking any FARs there? I'll look on the do some digging to see if there's actual LOI out there that talks about that. William, what are your thoughts on maintaining VYSE up to TPA rather than lower uh, altitude to 400 AGL? Good risk management, too hard on the engine. 0360 doesn't have a time limit takeoff power that I know of. Good question. My personal thoughts, I like to lower the nose attitude typically after I'm clear of the obstacle and climb out at a faster airspeed if obstacles allow. The reason I've made this decision is if I lose an engine, the lower pitch attitude and a higher airspeed means that I have a little bit more time to react before I'm in a stall situation, right? If you're climbing out at VYSE and VXSE, if you don't lower that nose during an engine failure rather rapidly, you're going to be approaching a stall very, very quickly. So I like giving myself more of a margin over stall. But that's an important caveat is only when the obstacles or terrain or climb gradients at your airport allow for that. The other advantage of a lower pitch attitude during climb out gives you better forward visibility. Being very nose high means that any potential traffic that's oncoming, maybe they're landing at the wrong direction at a non-towered field, or any birds, you don't have a lot of forward visibility at a really high pitch attitude during a VYSE climb. So I prefer a lower pitch attitude pretty much as soon as I'm clear of the obstacle. There's great reasons to hold a higher pitch attitude all the way to 1,000 feet. That's also valid. That's not wrong. It's just me. I would rather keep my engines a little bit cooler, have better forward visibility, and have a higher margin over stall speed during climb out. So hope that answers your question. All right, so if you have a ground instructor, an AGI, you're just adding on to an existing certificate. So you're just going to do an add-on ground certificate there. For the VOR Alpha, Luke, VOR Alpha out of LIT is required to time point from the VOR to the MAP, or can you use GPS to identify the MAP? Oh boy, the VOR Alpha. You know, Luke, I've flown that VOR Alpha a ton. That's one of our favorite places to go, or it used to be before the C-130 got RNAV capability. That was like the place everybody went to go do their circling approach, is that VOR Alpha out of LIT. And they're actually moving the VOR, by the way. So I don't know when your Checkride is, but that VOR is moving. I don't know if that VOR Alpha approach is going to move with the relocation of the VOR. I have no idea. So that's just a little food for thought there. If you have a way to identify the point, then timing is just a backup. So if you have a suitable RNAV system, so it's a TSO'd RNAV system, then you can identify that point using that RNAV system rather than using timing. So that timing is just a backup. So I hope that answers your question. Saif, yeah, I hope you get a CFI scheduled for the end of the year. Probably won't be with me. I've got a couple Air Force missions, a lot of Southwest flying, and then of course I got to spend time with the family during the holidays. So I'm pretty much booked up. I've got a couple days remaining, but obviously like today, I'm probably going to be using at least one of those days to rebook the check rides that get canceled today. Bert, I use the same risk management decisions for climb out. Speed is life, technique item only. Yeah, I agree with you, Bert. And if anybody's arguing with you, telling you that you're wrong, you know, there's no law that says you have to climb out a certain way. And it's all kind of dependent on that. Okay, let's see. You're welcome, William. All the questions, still 28 people in here. Sorry, Frank. I accidentally clicked a button and it hid your message. Let me see if I can undo that. Yeah, I think I unhit it. Sorry about that, Frank. Okay, any other questions? Okay, here we go. What is the best resource for learning how to read approach plates? Um, I'm sure there's some good videos out there. I should probably make some videos about how to read an approach plate, how to break it down. A knowledgeable CFII is a really good resource on how not only you're going to read the approach plate, but learn how you're going to brief the approach plate. And then it's also when you're learning how to read approach plates, it's important to figure out how to get information off of your installed navigation system and translate that on what the approach plate is. So that's a real common IFR mistake that I see is people do excellent IFR briefing looking at their approach plate. But what they fail to do is they fail to verify that the information they're reading on the approach plate is the same information that's on their flight management system, be it their Garmin 430 or 650 or 750 or G1000. So make sure you get in that habit pattern early of, okay, I read the approach plate and then I verify that the items I've read on the approach plate exist in the approach that I have loaded in my flight management system. And it looks like Bold Method has a good resource for approach plate. But I love Bold Method stuff. Their Bold Method's great. So that's what I would recommend there. So Elias, how's everything's going great, thanks. And then the airline DPE life is going well. I'm actually Southwest is it's fun. The airline flying is, everything's very standardized and professional and efficient, and the captains that I fly with are all great. The people there I work with are great. I haven't had any like terrible passenger experiences. It's just been great. I love Southwest. I think it's a great company. But I think all of the major airlines are really good places to work right now. Having that peace of mind of like a 401k and short term and long term disability, all that stuff is really comforting because I worked for a few years as kind of an independent, a business owner, independent DPE. And I kind of done a couple breakdowns of the pay. It may seem like DPEs are just raking in the cash, but when you compare it to, a 3 or 4 year first officer at a major airline, we make about the same as a 3 or 4 year FO, and we make a lot less than a captain at a major airline, with the added problem of it's all self-employment income and we have to pay our own insurance and we don't have these protections that a union offers. So that part, as a you know a father and a husband, being able to provide for my family and that level of comfort of the backup, the safety nets, I guess, if you will. Love that part about it. That's great. And I still get to do a little bit of DPE stuff on the side. So KASM, you didn't get the notification. Shoot me an email and I'll send you the update. All right, William, great question. My philosophies on circling one engine inoperative in a light twin is don't do it. I used to do that. I would make people circle in a light twin during the check ride, actually, because the plane I was using at the airport only had a circling approach. So that was the only option. So I guess outside of that, I don't do that anymore. By the way, we have an RNAV approach that we can fly now. So we just do that. I would not recommend circling one engine inoperative ever, really. If you want to practice it, that's fine. I'm not going to have you demonstrate that during the check ride. I think the act of practicing that is kind of like practicing a power off 180. There is some marginal benefit to it, but it comes at a pretty high risk. So you really need to weigh the risk versus reward of practicing a low level power off. I said power off 180, like a low level engine failure, the impossible turn. Practicing that impossible turn. I think I said power off 180. That's a different thing. So practicing the impossible turn is similar to practicing a one engine inoperative circling approach. There is some marginal benefit there, but it doesn't come without risk. So just be very careful if you're practicing that. I personally don't do it. The ACE guide is okay to reference during your oral. The ACE guide contains all FAA approved material, so feel free to use the ACE guide during your the oral. If your DPE isn't familiar with the ACE guide, you can show them on the main global page. I have a CAO button. That's the current as of. Show them that, and it has an, a table that shows all of the FAA manuals and their current as of date, so they can verify, yeah, this is all up to date information. And then give them the QR code so they can purchase it, because I guarantee you every DPE could use the ACE guide. So if they don't know about it, they need to use it. Let's see. I have a medical waiver for a lazy eye. Is a career in aviation unlikely? No, I wouldn't say uh, an aviation career is unlikely because of that. That's really a question for your AME to get a final answer on that. You may want to reach out to the AOPAs. Uh, they've got some medical advice services. You could reach out to them and see if they have more information on that. But I don't think that's a career killer at all. Thoughts on FAA reauthorization? I can't spell either, Drew. Don't worry about it. I'm excited about it. There's been a lot of changes, so I get excited about silly stuff, I guess. But what I like to see is, hey, our government worked. We signed this bill, and the FAA is acting on this stuff, and it's coming out. We've already seen it. There's been probably 12 new advisory circulars in the past 2 weeks. In fact, I was going to check today. I think the new Part 68 came out yesterday. I'm going to pull that up now. It looks like the Mosaic ruling is going to come out in the next, um, um, I guess, 6 months. Let's see, Part 68. Let me look at this real quick. It's hard for me to tell when this is updated. But the other thing that was exciting is I had a close friend that's a DPE that is allowed to give check rides on basic med again. So that's the type of common sense, updates to the laws that I think are needed. So to where, okay, yeah, you can use basic med and be a legal safety pilot. You can use basic med to be an examiner. I think those all make sense. So those parts of the reauthorization bill I'm really excited about. Some things that are coming down I don't agree with. So there's some changes with ferry permits that will be effective in December that are going to make ferry permits much harder to get. And I think that's a terrible decision. That's a terrible policy. Anytime you make ferry permits harder to get, you're basically building in this negative incentive for people to just not get ferry permits and fly planes illegally. Because when you make a ferry permit so difficult that it takes uh, 6 weeks to 2 months to get, they're just not going to do it, and they're going to wind up flying the plane anyway. Honestly, that a lot of operators are going to choose to do that. That's not the right thing to do, but you're building in a negative incentive. So rather than make it more difficult, we need to leverage technology to make it more straightforward to get ferry permits approved on a faster time basis, so people can fly within the laws, manage the risks appropriately. So those are some things that I don't agree with. Elias, every time you fly, looking for me up front. Hey, keep doing that. Maybe it'll work out. There's a lot of us there, but who knows? But always say hi to your pilots. We love it when people say, "Hey, thanks for the ride." Uh, that's a cool thing. Greg, hey man, I just watched you decoding the private pilot ACS. I was wondering if your video playlist will cover all the private parts. So yeah, Greg, you might have seen the most recent. If you look at the playlist, there's some older private pilot where I cover the entire ACS. That's under the old ACS, but still 99% of that stuff is still valid. So I haven't gotten to all the parts yet, but the older ACS covers all the parts, and it's still essentially the new ACS didn't change any huge pieces that aren't covered there. Hi, Michael. Skylar, thanks so much for your work. Man, I'm glad you feel more prepared, Skylar. It's great to hear. Asking a question for so William is asking a question for real life scenario. Personally, think I'd rather land with a tailwind, runway length permitting. Oh, I think that was in reference to a question before, maybe. Do you plan on continuing returning doing check rides in the near future? I'm local. Yeah, Mulligan. Uh, yeah, I'm doing check rides for Henderson today here in Russellville. It kind of depends, I book about 2 months out or a month out at a time, and I work a lot with Henderson. They keep my schedule pretty full because I'm one of the main examiners that gives check rides for them. So sure, just shoot me an email or a text. You can find those on the website. Elias, what are your thoughts on multi MEI practical tests performing single engine tasks by simulated engine out or actually shutting down the engine? So Elias, it depends on what task you're talking about. Um, Generally speaking, the ACS doesn't want us to actually shut down an engine below 3,000 feet AGL. So if you're doing an actual engine shutdown, you need to be at or above 3,000 feet AGL or at or above the minimum altitude required in the flight manual. So for some airplanes, that's 5,000 feet. Uh, for me, risk management wise, I like to do actual engine shutdowns around 5,000 feet rather than, you know, anything lower. But yes, I think it's very appropriate to do actual engine shutdowns several times during training, and then you have to perform an actual engine shutdown and restart during the practical test. Now, low altitude engine failures, you don't need to be doing those by shutting down the engine or pulling the mixture. You need to be doing it by pulling the throttle back to idle and simulating an engine failure that way. And then also simulating zero thrust by adding a little bit of throttle. Typically, it's around 1,200 RPMs or 12 inches of manifold pressure, depending on what kind of plane you're flying. But around 12 inches manifold pressure in most twins would give you a simulated zero thrust or feathered condition. So that's that. You're welcome, John. We'll see you. Yeah, it looks like Michael asked ASM or answered ASM's question there. Thanks for that. All right, guys, that's 53 minutes. I need to check in with these students to see if they're going to make it up here today. But appreciate y'all jumping on this. I'll see you next time. Y'all have a good day.